Hey, what's up everybody, your boy Simon from Simon TCG, and guys, thank you guys for coming to my first ever Alpha Clash video. I know I've been talking about this for a few weeks on my Flesh and Blood live streams and stuff, and it's finally here, and I see no better way to introduce myself to the community than a deck tech. As Alpha Clash is in its infancy, this is the time where most of the decks are in limbo, and people are creating all these different archetypes, testing all these different decks. And there should be a gameplay on my channel right there. Should be popping up. My first ever official game of Alpha Clash. And I played a red-green deck created by Diagon White. And I liked its theme of this nice mid-game board state that it could create. But the issues I had is I didn't really like its top end, I didn't really like its bottom end. And also, that mid-range game style wasn't really my forte. Played a few games with Jordy. He introduced me to some of the other archetypes he's made. And one of the big things I told him was like, I'm a really big combo guy, I'm a really big control deck. He showed me a control deck, he showed me a combo deck. And the base show of this deck here is his Safe Haven control deck, and I really liked what it was doing. I liked the resiliency it had. I liked its ability to get to its late game. I like that there are just certain turns once you get to 6 and 7 mana where you can just do unfair things, and I think that is one of the reasons to play control. You can stop your opponent from winning the game, then you get to do just something unfair. And then your opponent physically cannot respond. You can always respond to what your opponent is doing, but they cannot respond to what you're doing, if that makes sense. So the main goals of this deck is to try to keep the board clear early, keep life totals high. We don't even really need to attack. If we happen to have a free attack and there's no way to get punished, that is fine. That's cool. That's not what we're here for. We're here to make a impenetrable board, curve out to late game, win the game. The big strengths that this deck has is its card selection. Its card selection is fantastic. We have a free opt with our contender. That is just insane. We have cards like Amazon Rainforest just to dig us deeper into our deck. We have multiple cards that just draw from entering. We have a lot of card selection here, a lot of board removable. So let's go into it. We are a Clarity deck. This is going to be a green-white deck. Clarity reads, at 30. At the beginning of your draw step, you may look at the top 2 cards of your deck, then put them back in any order, or you can put them to the bottom of the deck. So what this allows for people that have played things like Magic, this is Opt 2, and this is free. A free Opt 2. And for people that have played Control and things like Magic, you know how good card selection is in Control. This is free card selection that you get at the start of the game. This is absolutely amazing. And then it gets even better when you're at 10. At 10, once per turn during your primary phase, you may look at the top 3 cards of your deck. If you do, put them back in any order, then draw 1. So when you're at 10, at the beginning of your draw phase, you're going to Opt 2. And then during your primary phase, you pretty much get to Ponder or... oh man, I'm blanking on the other one. Kind of Brainstorm. It's not really Brainstorm, but it's probably the closest thing you're going to have to an effective Brainstorm in this game. And I think that's absolutely amazing. This gives you really, really insane draw power late game, and it'd be one of the reasons to actually get to this low point. You obviously can heal yourself back up with a few cards we will talk about later, but I honestly would not be scared to be low. I think the lower you are, the scarier you actually become with this deck. So for anyone that's watched my deck techs with other games, you guys know how I like to separate my cards into piles, not by like how much they cost, color, and their type. I like to separate them. What is this card's theme? What is this card doing in the deck? Right? We'll start off, and I'm going to do this live just to see how bad this turns out. I'm going to spread this. Oh, okay, didn't actually end up too bad. we have seven clash round cards, and for those who do not know what clash rounds are, these are basically your stadium cards, your field spells, etc., in this game. We'll start off. We'll talk about. Here, I'm gonna scale these cards up for you. We'll start off talking about New York City. This is a 3-cost clash ground. Green says Alpha Clash cards get +2 and flight. Trigger enter, draw 1 card. Now, a couple things to remember about this card. This effect is symmetrical. So, if your opponent is running a lot of those alpha cards, this can turn really bad in your favor. This is one of the reasons we are only running 1. If we go against a deck that is also running New York City themselves, well, obviously they're going to be able to benefit off of this. We don't want that. What we're here to do is, this is one of our pseudo finisher cards. And the reason why this is not in the pile, I kind of wanted all the clash round cards in their own pile, because this deck really does want to control what is out there. It's running 7 opposed to like normal 4 to 6 that others are running. I feel wanting to control the field in every kind of way is absolutely important. But again, this is whenever you are able to create a board late game, because you do have a lot of low cost things. So the contrary to a lot of decks is you're going to want to put your 1 cost out early, which honestly is fine. You'll even do it in this deck a lot. But the one thing that you can also do is save them for late game, like I said, opt them to the bottom with clarity. And when you finally reach that late game, where you can have 2 to 3 of those cards out, play a New York City, and before where you were swinging for 3 damage, right? You're swinging for 3. Now you can swing for 9. And something like that is insane. That can just win you the game. And the fact that if your opponent's cards are tapped and stuff, and they can't defend this, because what I've found out, just from watching other people play, people do tend to tap out often. People don't really hold their creatures back. Now, this might be a thing that people change later down the road. These might just be some growing pains early in the game. But right now, I see people just tapping out and then sending a prayer and hoping they don't down a backswing. Well, if they choose to do that and we can New York City and just swing for 9, well, we can get a lot of games out of nowhere. So that is New York City. New York City is a fantastic card in this deck. But again, we are only running 1 because we do not want their opponent to benefit off of this too much. And also we also aren't a full Alpha Clash deck. If we only had Alpha Clash cards, we could probably run more of the New York Cities and not be too scared to have it out. But because off the top of my head, maybe I think we have 16 maybe. I apologize if I've not numbers wrong. We don't have enough cards in the deck to really benefit off of this. Next, we have Grand Park Chicago. Grand Park Chicago is a yellow. I'm tired, guys. Sorry. Is a white 3-cost. It's +0/+2. Trigger enter. You may search your deck for 1 clash card with initial resource cost of 5 or less. Reveal it and shuffle your deck and add that card to your hand. So this is doing 2 things, right? This is doing 2. This is building that wall that we talked about at the start of the game. This is building that wall. And then this is also card selection. You guys are really starting to see what this deck is here to do. So those pity 1/2s are now 1/4s. So that magnate ability that you guys actually see right here, this ability is absolutely fantastic. They get +0/+1. Well, what if we just, up that to +2? So now you have 1/3s, 1/4s, 2/5s just running around, just walling everything. And then on top of that, you get to search now. keep in mind, right? This effect is symmetrical. Unlike New York City, I definitely think we will benefit off of something like this more than our opponent, because our deck is inherently defensive. We inherently want to wall our opponent. I don't think our opponent goes, man, hopefully, man, this red-black deck, this red-white deck, man, hopefully I can wall the control player. Like, they don't go into a match thinking that. But we go into the match saying we would love to wall that Moxie deck. Like, I think Grand Park Chicago's one of the best cards in the deck, and a lot of people will sleep on this card. Next, hello? Where the heck did I just go? Everyone knows Amazon Rainforest. This card is just a staple if you're in green. Simple. What this allows you to do, it's a 1-cost green. Trigger enter. Draw a card. Already good. And then during each player's draw step, they get another card. But they must discard a card. Importantly, this is not just always just plain raw card advantage. Now, it is, right? Because you're drawing 2, discarding 1. So it's still +1. But with that being said, the discard, depending on what deck you're going against, could actually be more impactful than first meets the eye. Decks enjoy the additional resources, don't get me wrong. I don't think you ask a deck, hey, if you get to draw 2 cards, you're going to be upset. No deck will say, no, we're not. Well, don't make me draw 2 cards. Don't do that. But the other thing is, like I said, if you're committing cards to the board, well, that makes next turn you have less resources. If you're obviously charging a card, giving more resources, well, that's less cards. If you're laying down traps and accessories, well, that's less cards. So you get to use Amazon Rainforest like 3 turns, and you're just spending all these resources, and then you're like, oh, well, I have 1 card in hand now all of a sudden, and my opponent has controlled my board, and now this Amazon Rainforest is a little bit less impressive. That being said, the aggro decks can take advantage of this if they're able just to curve and constantly have threats, especially selective threats, because they get to select what card they keep. But again, this is a card. I still do think we use better than our opponent. We are a control deck, and this is a thing I'm going to repeat a lot. Card selection, card advantage. For opponents constantly committing cards to the board, and we can 2-for-1 them, for example, or we can just stall them. If they're playing all these creatures that can't get through, well, those additional cards that they're getting, what are they really doing? They're just milling themselves at that point. So I definitely think Amazon Rainforest is here to stay. The card is absolutely fantastic. So those are going to be the Clash on cards. So big takeaways again from this pile is obviously these things are here to give us evasive threats at the end game, card advantage, and a wall ability in the mid game. Next, we have our draw cards. These are just cards that just get us more cards. Start off, we have 3 Finite Cunning Planner. This is a green 1-drop that says triggered feat. You may draw 1 card. This is a Alpha card, and it is a 1/1. Now, what this is strictly here to do, this is here to say, oh, you don't have breakthrough? Well, cool. Dude, let me actually say this. If this card ever gets a trade, I'm not talking about just die and get your card. If this card ever gets a trade, like you get to clash buff this, and this trades with something, this is just nuts. Now, this isn't in a lot of the control builds I've seen, and I understand why. It's just a 1/1 that draws your card. Like, there's more impressive cards that you can do. But what this, again, allows you to do, this says, hey, you want to just blitz my contender. Well, again, we said we don't care to be lower than our opponent. We don't care to be around that 10 mark. Obviously, we don't want to be taking damage willy-nilly in the early game. This just says, alright, for one turn, I'm pretty much blinking one of your attacks, and I get a card. So I'm going to trade it out on this evenly. And this card in the card draw can draw me, I think, to remove your card. And again, I use my resources so much better than you. You have a limited amount of time as an aggro deck to kill me. Before my top end threats just do way more than you. And especially with some of my creatures also having removal, it really shows why cards like this are integral to this kind of strategy. But they don't, that is not a thing that's obvious when you first see it. It is not obvious. Most people see this as just, oh yeah, cool, I get to draw a card, I get to block a free attack. No. This says your like 6 turn go fish kill turn now probably turns into 8. Because I'm going to stop one of your attacks, get a card that probably enters one of your cards, now you're going to start over again. This can literally add this literally adds 2 turns to your life sometimes. And again, it's a card, no one's going to think of it like that. You're going to get so much value out of this card. Next, we have our Havens. We have Haven, Resourceful Helper, and we have Haven, Hidden in Plain Sight. Both of them do have the mode to just draw a card. Haven, Hidden in Plain Sight, it's not going to let me separate it, is it? Oh, there we go. Does have a secondary mode to gain 2 life. There are going to be scenarios where that's just insane. And also, early game, it's not a bad wall, especially if we have something like Chicago out. Because then this becomes a 1/4. You know how many things can get through a 1/4? Early game? Not many. And now our opponent, if they want to kill, they're going to have to commit multiple cards or very specific cards and then kill a card like this. And all this is just a 1/2 that drew us a card probably. It's actually just insane. And then obviously, base Haven again. Turn 1, dude, just being able to start drawing the cards early, start filtering early. Absolutely amazing. Haven's absolutely staple of an archetype like this. And those are 11 of those types of cards. Next, I like the spread feature. I like it. These are our removal cards. These are the primary ways we have to remove the cards on the battlefield, and why it may not appear to be a ton, right? It's only 11 cards. Because we have the draw with cards like this, because we have a contender opting, you'll see these cards more often. And the other thing is, you don't actually have to see like all 11 to win the game. If you just see like this many, right, you can probably win that game. If you can actually probably see this many. You can just see 6 and probably still get there. So let's talk about them. First, we have Destructive Arrival. To 1 cost, quick action, counterattack. Send target attacking clash card with attack power 2 or less to Oblivion. Absolutely bonks. There's very few cards turn 1, turn 2 that are going to get around this. And depending on how fragile your opponent's deck is, they can just send them, but this can just sit them back 2 to 3 turns. Now, obviously there will be decks that says, oh, you took out 1 threat, well that sucks, here's 4 more. In those matchups, yeah, they're right. But I don't think there's a lot of times where you do this turn 1, turn 2, and your opponent just keeps the gas on and is just effectively able to get through and constantly get through all of your answers, right? I don't think that's likely. Like I said, this is pretty diverse. There are some bigger cards that don't have a lot of power, and they're just there for pure utility. This is also amazing. The only downside of this is they need to attack with that card. So if they can read that you have one, they just want to attack with that. But then that's just effective health. If they have a card right here, right? If they have a card that is like 2 or less, and they're like, he might have a destructive rival, and I kind of get blown up by that card because they have like 1 green up specifically. I'm not going to attack for that with 2. Well, cool, you just gained 2 life. And you effectively still cast the card. It's like playing in Magic, right? And I'm going to keep using Magic example. It's like your opponent sees you have 2 blue mana open. They could have a counter spell, and I don't want to get my spell countered. I'm not going to cast a spell. You effectively just countered their spell. You got the same exact result as if you actually countered the spell. The only difference is you didn't even have to cast it. It can be the same thing with this. I don't want to get my creature removed, so I'm not going to attack with it. Cool, I still removed your creature anyway because it's not doing anything. It's just insane. It is just insane. Hello? Oh wait, they got bigger. Gross. Hold on. Hold on, guys. We're doing this live. This is a little scuffed. Going to be honest. We're slightly scuffed. Oh, this is so gross, actually. Oh, I'm getting trolled live. I'm getting trolled live on my deck. There we go. Next. We have Genghis Khan. Just kidding. We've Kagan the Dragon. Has flight. Absolutely just stupid. If your opponent has no way to block this, they're just on a clock. And if you've played the mid game right, they shouldn't even really have that many cards in the first place. Or their cards just can't enter this. On top of it being a 5/5 with flight, on top of all that, when it enters, you can send a class card to Oblivion, which is just an absolute insane. They have a really powerful card right here. They have a really powerful card that's just kicking your butt. Turn 6, you can go boom, Kagan, Oblivion, please. Thank you very much. Anyway, here's 5. And you can get to this point in the game and still be quite healthy again with how we have the deck built. This card is just simply good, and this is an off card that gets sold off by New York City, so now it's going for 7. Pretty good, pretty good. Next, and lastly, we have our trap. Comes in for 2. It's another counterattack. Send target attacking class card with initial cost 2 or less to the Oblivion. Then, that card's controller discards 1 card. Dude. This card mid-game is amazing. So remember when I was talking about Amazon Rainforest and how certain decks don't actually use as well as they think they do, because they're like drawing all these cards, they're using all this mana, and then they go and okay, I have 1 or 2 cards left, and even though I have 1 or 2 cards, I'm still kind of in top deck mode because they've been answering my threads. They still have cards in the accessory zone. Oh, I really need to close this game out, so I'm just gonna start attacking with everything. You're like, boom, here's a trap. Kill that card, discard a card from your hand. Dude, the discard from your hand is nuts. It's nuts. Because the thing about it is, and the thing about interaction of this kind. So here's the difference between Thoughtseize at sorcery speed and Thoughtseize at instant speed. Let me break this down to you guys, right? Obviously, Thoughtseize just is an amazing card in Magic. You get to look at your opponent's hand, discard a card, boom. Sweet, you're in there. You're absolutely in there. But then, your opponent gets to go to their turn, being like, okay, I have a plan. At the start of my turn, I can execute my plan without fear of being disrupted. Versus, your opponent has a plan going into their turn. They think they're in the clear. They have this really cool turn set up. And now you disrupt it by making them discard a card. And maybe if they had a limited amount of cards in their hand, and they needed all of them, or just the majority of them, well, now they have a choice. They can either stop their plan and keep just some good cards in their hand, or B, if they want to push through with their cool plan, well, now they're banking on that working, because now they're working from behind with either not a lot of cards and resources, or just no cards at all. And that's what this kind of card can do. This is a absolutely massive 2-for-1, and this can even be a bigger than a 2-for-1. Like if the card in play had like a static ability or had some type of triggered ability that mattered. If they were setting up for a late game combo and they needed, constantly have attach resources. There's just so much the card advantage, card economy matters here, and getting to have a 2-for-1 for 2 mana is absolutely just. I know people are gonna flame for this. I think this is probably one of the most powerful cards in this deck, and I don't even think it's close. Next, we have just some general utility cards. These cards aren't really super impressive on their own, but they serve a purpose. First, we have Morale Boost. This is a card that everyone has, just in a different name. We can only play this one because our contender is white. Target clash, our contender gets +2/+2, and then you may draw a card. Every single class, colors rather, has this kind of card. Just with a different name. You should just run it in every single deck. It's way too much value. Enough said about that one. Next, we have Shadowlight's Light Beam. This is a 3-drop white counterattack. Prevent all clash damage that would be dealt during this clash. Then you're contending against your life. So what a lot of people are going to try to do is on turns that you do choose to be aggressive. Now, obviously, over time, people might be able to read that you have this kind of card. So, like, if you haven't been attacking with, like, your clash cards this whole entire game, right? And all of a sudden, you just swing one at their contender. And they're like, okay, this is my opening to, like, kill this card. You can Shadow's Light Beam, right? But then, down the road, people might be able to read that you have that kind of play, and they might play accordingly. But for right now, I don't see that as a common thing that's going to happen. I do think there are going to be a lot of turns where you just can get away with swinging with one of your creatures. They not block, they try to kill on their turn. And you get to blow them out with a Light Beam. Now, this is a card, I will openly tell you, this is a cuttable card, or a card that can strictly go to sideboard. There has been a lot of moments where this card has been somewhat medium. I will openly say that. But for right now, I don't think there's a ton of cards that fit this deck much better, so we are currently running Shadow's Light Beam. Lastly, we have two, Is This Who You Are? Is This Who You Are is a 3-cost trap counterattack. Target attacking clash card with initial resource cost of 3 or less, 3 or more, gets -4, -0, and then you can draw a card. So this isn't direct removal, which is why it's in the utility. But if they have like one of those powerful like 4+ attack cards, and you can pretty much just neg it, don't and then draw the card, you take that trade almost every single time. Now, obviously, you would rather remove it. Like, don't like that is. You would just rather remove it if you could. But there are some lack. How do I say this? There is plenty of removal in the game, but there's not enough to where you can't run. Like, you kind of have to run this card right now. Because I think if you were able to run green white and just have another 3 or 4 removal cards, that would probably just be nuts. So this is just the next best up, and like I said, you get the bonus of just drawing a card, which is pretty good. That is going to be it for utility. We're going to skip this next. These are just good cards. They don't really fit into any particular theme or anything like this. This is just a 4/4. I mean, it has a really good body. It is an alpha card, and there are a lot of cards that benefit from alpha cards. But it's just a 4/4. Next, we do have a card that does care about alpha cards. Sonaro, Awakened Breaker. He's currently breakdancing. That is why he's called a breaker. He's getting, what do the kids say? He's getting fresh right now. He's a 5 calls for a 3. That says trigger on attack. This card gets +1/+1, so it brings him up to a 5/4 to the end turn, and you draw a card. Already amazing. The bomb effect, unfortunately, we don't get because it says if your tender's green and alpha, you may ready a class card you control with an initial resource cost of 1 or less. We don't get that effect. We just get the top effect, but the top effect is more than serviceable. Just a fine card. Like, not every card is a home run. You just have cards that are just fine like this. But at the end of the day, like I said, 5 is not nothing, and then drawing a card is also not nothing. So, not too bad. Those are going to be just our kind of just good cards. Of course, everything got bigger because this world hates me. Alright, we'll deal with this later. Get this, you get out of my face, actually, can't we? Okay. I'm getting embarrassed. I'm getting embarrassed on my thing right now. I'm just getting embarrassed. All right, let's get back on track here with this last one. As you guys can see, I'm a very loose person. We don't take everything too serious. Lastly, this is going to be your end game. These are going to be the bombs. This is how we like to end the game. First, we have clarity. We got big clarity here. Foreseen Fate. This is a 6 cost white or 5. This has exclusive. You can only have 1 copy of this card in your control 1 time, keep that in mind. But this does have trigger enter. Your clash cards get +2/+0 depending on the type, but it doesn't really matter. But it also has the effect once per turn during your primary phase, you may look at the top 2 cards of your deck. If you do, add one of them to your hand, put this at the bottom. So even in our end game, we are still with the card selection and the card economy on one of our finishers. And even if we can't end the game the turn that we play Clarity, real quick, mind you, Clarity scales significantly with the amount of cards you have in play. So if we did what we talked about earlier and we, kept some of our low cost cards in play for the late game, you can just finish games with Clarity. But even if you just play Clarity, and even if you just buff 1 card, already amazing. And then she's just constant card advantage every single turn. Absolutely bonkers. Insane. Next. Oh, we do have 2 of those. I will say that. We have 2 of those. Next. We have the Boy Magnate, the Tyrant back. It's gonna be the 5 cost, 5/3. He also has exclusive. He also has flight. Absolutely good. Trigger on enter. You may send target accessory card to the building. If you do, all other alpha class cards you get +1/+0. So I actually got to play a game with this, and I had a accessory card stuck in my our accessory zone for like 5 turns, and it was just never going to trigger because it was late game, and I think it was a different build. I think it just cared about a card with like 2 or less cost or something. No, it was the one with 2 or less power, I believe, right? And it was just never going to be able to trigger, ever. So what I did, played this, sent that to this one, because obviously my opponent didn't have one anyway. But I actually got to get this card out, which that was never going to get used anyway. Then I got to buff the team and got to clap his cheeks, and it was really cool. I think this card's super diverse as a form of disruption. It's not always going to be disruption, but it can be a form of disruption as well as a buff. Lastly, we have the king. Alpha Alistair, and let me we definitely got to make this boy big. Alpha Alistair, Giver of All. This is a 8 cost. This has Irrefutable. This card cannot be rented from entering play. Observant. This card cannot attack the turn it enters play. That is perfectly fine. It's still a 9/9. It's still a 9/9. Unrivaled. We'll have one card with Unrival in the deck. And obviously, this is the one that we have chosen. Trigger or enter. Each player sends all other class cards they control from their class zone to the Oblivion. So let's stop there. This can be a one-sided board wipe. We don't always commit to the board as much as our opponent. I said always. There are times obviously we do commit cards to the board, like early game, mid game. But turns that we're playing this. Just the dopamine kick of you having like 0 and your opponent have like 4 creatures. You play Alpha Alistair and you're like, and Thanos. It's just insane. Like, this gets around a lot of future-proofing things as well. Things like things that can't be targeted, things that can't be destroyed. Like, I think this card will stand the test of time because of how they have it worded. Will that make it too powerful? Who knows right now. Right now, absolutely amazing. So the next thing, after you just absolutely mollywop your opponent and send everything to the Oblivion, each player will then search for an Alpha Class card and put it into play. So, here's where you're like, well, Xiphon, I'm giving my opponent a free card. That's not that good. But hold on, let me continue reading. Cards that enter play this way lose all effects and abilities till the end of the turn. So any card that they want to like bring in that has like a really good trigger enter ability won't have it. It just won't have it. So that's where the ability doesn't really matter, right? And then even then, you put this into play. The other cards you put into play can attack. Now, depending on what your opponent does, because this is a simultaneous effect, depending on what your opponent gets, you could just attack over it. Like, let me paint this picture for you, right? Let me paint a picture for you about this whole entire card. You just board wiped your whole entire opponent's field. Maybe some of yours. Your opponent then gets to have one card out of that exchange. And you're like, well, no, that's pretty good, Xiphon. Like, my opponent got a card back. With that still, your opponent now has one card to beat your 9/9. Let me say that again. Your 9/9. And then whatever other card you shooter, you can just get a beef stick. You can get like you can get a Genghis Khan, dude. You can get Kagan. Now, yeah, his trigger entry ability won't happen. But then he's a 5/5. If your opponent can't attack over it, well, now you just have a 9/9. Now you have a 5/5 with flight. And something like this specifically just makes your endgame absolutely unrivaled. If you can reach the endgame and resolve Alpha Alistair, I doubt that you lose many of those games. Hopefully I did this deck justice and you guys can kind of get the theme and the play style of this deck. Hopefully there will be a gameplay video of this deck soon. I will try to get that on the channel. But as of right now, it's been your boy Simon from Siphon TCG. And here's the sideboard. Peace!